A call to order and approval of agenda. Motion by.
Hi,
Who was that?
Rita.
Okay, so Rita, and seconded by Nancy. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. And because it's we're doing this online, we're going to do a roll call. So Kelly.
Reagan,
Here.
Forsythe,
Here.
Lightfoot,
Here.
Sheridan,
Here.
Peter,
Here.
Denisha,
Here.
Perkins,
Here.
Akers,
Here.
Fay,
Here.
Haggard, Arquette,
Here.
Burke,
Okay. So I believe that's everyone. Tony.
I just stopped because John Burke didn't answer.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So-
here.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Oops. Tony Arquette,
Tony Arquette is excused. He had to work. He's been called into the Power Authority.
Terminelli,
Here.
Curran,
Here.
13 present.
Okay, thank you very much. Ruth would like to make a statement about tonight's meeting. Ruth?
Good evening. Just wanted to mention this is our first broadcast via Zoom with the Board of Legislators at the Finance Committee meeting. And also we are live streaming this meeting on YouTube. So I just wanted to mention the mindfulness of our audience while we're streaming live. And if there are specific questions for public health under the County Administrator's report, I will provide you with a COVID-19 update, and Dana will be joining us as well.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Ruth regarding what she just stated? Okay, seeing none, our next is approval of the minutes for February 24th. Moved by
Dan Fay.
Dan Fay, seconded by Miss Nancy Arquette.
Oh.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the minutes of that resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our first resolution is with the highway, Mr. Chambers. The resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Barton and LeJudas for professional engineering services for the Northumberland Street Bridge over Norristown Bay project, bin number 3341380. Moved by, you'll have to raise your hand, I believe,
So moved.
by Mr. Perkins and seconded by Mr. Lightfoot. Don, Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you. This resolution allows us to hire a consulting firm, Martin LaJudas, to do the design of the Northumberland Street Bridge removal and also for the installation of the utilities. There's a water and sewer line that must be put under the bay. This project is being funded through the READY program.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers? Ms. Arquette.
Not for Mr. Chambers, but I would like to I will be recusing myself from this vote.
Okay, so noted. Anyone else? Okay. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye or with your hands up, I believe. Do you want the hands up or just aye? But aye, I guess. Yeah.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Chambers. The next resolution, Mr. Chambers, is
Yes.
authorizing the issuance of a negative declaration related to SJ.03 Northumberland Bridge Project in Morristown, New York. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Lightfoot. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, in order to progress the project on Northumberland Street Bridge, we must do a make a seeker determination. Staff has put together, my staff and I have put together a negative declaration documents for the board to review. We have looked at this and determined that there will be no great impact on the environment by the removal of the structure, that we're actually returning it more to a natural state. But due to the requirements on this project, it needs to be a coordinated review. And this is part of that process of going forward, of basically making St. Lawrence County the lead agency, declaring a negative declaration if that's the will of the board.
Just call their names. Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? All those in favor, Ms. Arquette?
Again, not a question, but in this, for this resolution, I will again be recusing myself.
So noted. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is modifying the 2020 budget for the Department of Highways for decreased capital highway improvement program CHIPS funding. Moved by
So moved.
John Burke, second by Mr. Perkins. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you. The executive budget that has been brought forward at the state of New York does not include the extreme winter recovery funds that was anticipated in the 2020 county budget. This resolution would remove that amount of funds from the department for use on road paving and other projects. At this point, this is, bringing this forward basically to highlight that there has been a negative impact so far. And if the state budget is passed at time and this money is put back in, we could certainly have this pulled from the regular legislative meeting that's upcoming.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the Franklin County Highway Department for road salt. Moved by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Lightfoot. Mr. Chambers.
Yes. The last several years, we have been doing a cooperative bid with Franklin County, which has yielded the county approximately $20 per ton savings from the New York State OGS bid. I think it's in the best interest of the counties, the two counties, to go in as a cooperative bidding to render the best price for St. Lawrence County.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Our next resolution is modifying the 2020 budget for the Department of Highways for bridge maintenance repair. Moved by
So moved.
Mr. Perkins, second by John Burke. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, this is as a result of the audits that we've had on the department that showed that we probably should be creating a separate account for bridge maintenance itself, things that are not a capital expense. In the past, we've basically had one parent account for bridge repair, whether it be a capital or a maintenance. This would be actually putting money just in a maintenance account to do various repairs on the entire county bridge system.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Our next resolution is modifying the 2020 budget for Highway Department for the federal pass-through projects.
So moved.
By, who said so moved? You know, Jim?
Larry Denisha.
Larry.
Thank you, Larry. Seconded by Mr.
Me.
Perkins and Rita Curran.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chambers?
Yes, this resolution basically moves funds around within the existing highway budget to fund the overs and unders basically, and some of the capital projects. And if you allow me, what I could do is just so you have where things are going from. The first line in decrease, which is has the last numbers of 1901. That's from the Browns Bridge project, engineering design. And then the increase in appropriations, the ones ending in 1702 is for South Shore project down in Wanakina. The numbers ending in 1801 are for the preservation projects that are the four bridges that are lumped together, one on County Road 46, one on County Road 17, one on County Road 8, and one on County Road 3. The next one is putting money into Brown's Bridge into subcontracts, as well as the next one into miscellaneous. The 1902 is for the County Road 17 culvert projects. It's a state aid project on County Road 17 between DeKalb and Russell. 3 culverts on that project, all lumped together. The 1903 is for Depot Street in Helena.
Okay, thank you, Don. Any questions for Mr. Chambers? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Thank you.
I just want to say I can only see 6 legislators on the board. So I can see Joe Lightfoot, Bill Sheridan, John Burke, Nancy Arquette, Nicole, and Rick Perkins. So don't be offended if I don't see your hand because you're not on the screen. So, but Dylan will let me know. Okay.
Can
now
you
they
hear
can
us,
see
Kevin?
Yep, I can hear you. And actually, Dylan, just get it. I got all of you on there now. It's a nice pink shirt there, Jim Reagan.
Thank you. Good to hear that you've taken up fashion criticism.
Okay, that's better. I can see everyone now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Environmental Systems Research Institute Incorporated, ESRI, to provide 2 ARC GIS licenses and an annual maintenance agreement, and modifying the 2020 budget for real property tax office. Moved by John Burke, seconded by, I think Jim Reagan had his hand up there. Okay, Mr. Green.
Yes, good evening. The resolution you've got in front of you is a request for tax mapping computer software for our office. We're asking for 2 ARC GIS licenses along with their yearly maintenance agreements for the $13,939. This is purchased from Esri outfit out of California. The reason we need these is our office maps and creates tax maps along with tax maps, and also assigns 911 addresses. Without this software, 2 of the 3 mappers are not able to do that type of work. We've got 3 map techs. We have a senior map tech that has had this software for all the years. The last 5 or 6 years, the 2 map techs we have not purchased the software for them. I think it was prior before me, so it was probably to save money for the budget. We encountered this here last fall when we were updating our the Windows 10 computers and found that the new computers would not accept the old software. So, and this came in after our budget was submitted in September, October time period. So that's why we're coming to get this funding available. So that's-
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Any questions for Mr. Green concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Our next resolution involves our county attorney. The resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with New York Environmental Protection and Spill Compensation Fund regarding a tax delinquent property owned by Homestead Dairies. Moved by
Move it.
Mr. Lightfoot, and I think seconded by John. I still don't have, and I don't think there's more room. We don't have Dave Forsyth and Rita Curran on the screen, so.
Who were the two motions again? Did you say?
I'm here.
Joe Lightfoot. Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you all right. It's just you're not on the screen, but that's okay. So.
I can see
Mr.
Rita on
Button.
mine.
Okay, you can, okay. I just, don't be offended if I don't see your hand. I cannot see your picture, so. Mr. Button.
The resolution you have in front of you is a resolution that will authorize one of our regular agreements that have been identified as a pre-foreclosure, post-cleanup or pre-cleanup agreement with the DEC. With respect to Homestead Dairies, the cleanup has not occurred as of yet. It's our hope that we might be able to start sometime in the next 30 days. But this agreement after cleanup would allow us to move forward with foreclosure on the property. And from the proceeds of the sale at the auction, we would pay 50% of that back to the DEC as we have traditionally done with our agreements.
Any questions for Mr. Button? Ms. Arquette?
Mr. Chairman, I will be recusing myself from the vote on this resolution.
Okay, so noted. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with New York Environmental Protection and Spill Compensation Fund regarding tax delinquent properties owned by Stanley Smith Estate. Moved by
Rita.
Rita Curran, seconded by Mr. Lightfoot and John Burke and Rick Perkins. Mr. Button.
The resolution you have in front of you, as I just explained with respect to the Homestead Dairies location, the Stan Smith location, as you're all aware, has in fact been cleaned. There was a significant amount of petroleum-based product that was taken out of the location. There were tanks that were also removed from there, with fill having been placed in that location. And in addition, there was some type of event that took place that resulted in a portion of the structure coming down that had to come down anyway. So we are prepared to move forward with the execution of agreement with the DEC that will permit us to take it without any liability in the chain of title and sell it at auction.
Any questions for Mr. Button concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll be recusing myself from this resolution also due to employment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Arquette. So noted. So the motion passes. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign an amended memorandum of understanding with Norfolk Bakery LLC to collect delinquent taxes. Moved by
Larry Denisha.
and seconded by Mr.
Rita
Burke
Kern.
and Rita Curran. Thank you.
I think the board is already aware that the Norfolk Bakery has been under an agreement associated with the repayment of taxes that were accumulated by the prior owner of the property that Norfolk Bakery currently occupies, Alaskan Oil. Alaskan Oil sold to the current occupants of Norfolk Bakery, but did not at that time cover the expenses associated with their delinquency in the taxes. The agreement that we originally entered into, the Norfolk Bakery defaulted on, resulting in the requirement for a renegotiated agreement. The resolution that you have in front of you would authorize the chair to execute that renegotiated agreement.
Any questions for Mr. Button?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Forsyth.
Steve, when was the last agreement made with Norwood Bakery?
Last agreement was made in 2017.
Okay, and when was it nullified, or when was it
They went delinquent in 19.
19? Okay, I'm going to be opposing this, same as I've stated before. I think we gave them one opportunity, and I'm not willing to give two on this one, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, is there anything in there regarding a default? I don't see anything in here. If they default again, that we foreclose on them? Do we need anything in there?
Mr. Perkins, there will be an agreement that will actually be prepared and executed. This resolution merely allows the chair to sign, but the terms of that agreement would be to allow us to declare if they fall into default, their immediate default, and if they are incapable of curing within a limited period of time, that we will be able to continue forward with the foreclosure process.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So I have a question because of this, about how much of this would be written off that they would not expect it to be paid, what the current charges are now?
Well, the provision of the current MOU, which would probably be carried over in the new MOU as a result of the default, would be that at the conclusion of the period of payment of the current principal, that they would have to make an application to the board to forgive any of the rest. I will say there's about $36,000 in actual taxes. The remainder is interest, penalties, and fees, which, as I understand, is roughly another $64,000 that's floating out there in interest, penalties, and fees.
So essentially, we would be writing off $64,000, which would be a majority of it be attributed to Alaskan Oil?
Yes, that's correct.
The other question I have is, in addition to the $3,000 that they agree upon signing and the $1,000 a month for 33 months, in addition, they will be paying their regular taxes. Is that correct?
That's correct. They have actually, during this entire period, even during the default on our agreement, been keeping their current taxes current.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Anyone else? See, yes, Ms. Arquette.
Quick question. When was this agreement with the bakery completed? The reason I ask is, was this prior to all of the directives that have come out from both the state and the federal government on social distancing? My concern is with the hard hit that we've had on small businesses in St. Lawrence County, will they be able to make these payments because of the restrictions?
The tentative understanding was reached prior to the COVID-19 outbreak.
Would it be prudent for us? I'm not opposed to this agreement, but would it be prudent of us to push back the date of the first payment in light of what has happened in the community to our small businesses because of COVID? I mean, I have a business in Potsdam that's recently closed because they just can't keep their doors open because of lack of business.
Ms. Arquette, if I may comment on that, there is an executive order that was issued by the governor that has provided direction with respect to foreclosures. It does not differentiate between those that are commercial foreclosures and those that are tax foreclosures. And that has stayed foreclosing proceedings until June 28th. So theoretically, it would be possible and probably prudent to provide the same amount of delay that every other taxpayer would get with respect to foreclosure proceedings right now anyways.
Okay, because again, my concern is, yes, I'm not in disagreement to this proposal. However, I'm worried that they will not be able to make the payment. And in light of an unprecedented time, maybe we should give them just a bit of an extension to make sure that they can pay the bill.
So if I could say something, I don't know how to.
Just announce, yeah, it's Rita Curran. Go ahead, Rita.
Hi. So I can tell you that they're still selling donuts. You can call ahead. They have them boxed up. They'll box them for you. You can just show up and they'll kind of take your money and hand them out the door to you.
Okay, Ms. Arquette again.
I do understand that. Many of our local businesses and restaurants are still supporting the community and still selling their product and offering pickup. But my concern is, are they making enough money to be able to pay both their bills and the money that they owe us? During the COVID response time.
Okay. Mr. Burke, can you offer any insight? I mean, you live close to the business. Have you been in contact with them knowing that they're selling their usual amount of donuts or producing that? Do you know, John?
I haven't been in contact with them for probably, I'd say maybe 4 weeks. I think they're, like Rita said, they're selling donuts, but I just can't imagine that most businesses haven't been somehow impacted by this virus. So if we could, again, if it were my choice, I would prefer to hold off to execute the agreement until we get close to being through with this virus.
Okay. Would you like to comment on that, Jonathan?
As I indicated, I think right now, even if we executed and they weren't able to pay during this period, I couldn't do anything until at least June 28th. So if it is any comfort to the board in making a decision, I would imagine that if this is approved at the final or at the full board meeting in April, that I would probably take 30 to 60 days to wrap up the draft of the agreement and have them come in and execute. So we wouldn't even be looking at this starting until probably June.
We could probably amend John, Mr. Burke?
Well, I was going to say, and that gives the board plenty of time to take action in between if they feel it's warranted. But I think your plan, Steve, is a good one to follow for the time being.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burke. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Forsyth is opposed. Thank you very much. Our next resolution is setting the allocation of algorithm for the workers' compensation plan participants for the years 2021, 2022, and 2023. Moved by Mr. Forsyth, seconded by
Rita Kern.
Rita Curran. Thank you very much. Mr. Button.
Thank you. As I believe most of you are aware, under local law number 1 from 1956 that established the self-insurance workers' compensation plan, St. Lawrence County operates a fully funded self-insurance plan that requires that we establish an algorithm that would dictate the portion of the apportionment that would be assigned to each plan participant that joins in our workers' compensation setup. Right now, St. Lawrence County operates a self-insurance workers' compensation plan that has all municipalities, with the exception of 2, included. This apportionment algorithm has to be adopted once every 3 years. After that is adopted, we will take that algorithm and utilize it to calculate out how much each plan participant has to introduce. The last time an algorithm was adopted by the county was in 2017, and that set the apportionment algorithm for 18, 19, and 20. The resolution you have in front of you would establish the apportionment algorithm for the years of 2021, 2022, and 2023. The apportionment algorithm in the resolution would make no changes from the algorithm that was adopted in 2017 for 18, 19, and 20.
Any questions for Mr. Button concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Button.
Yes, sir.
Our next resolution is involves HR, and so the resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a confidentiality agreement with ProAct to provide confidential information to US-RX Care. Moved by
Rita Kern.
Rita Kern, seconded by Ms. Arquette. Ms. Miss Dorothy, are you on the line joining us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, so good evening. Currently, St. Lawrence County has an agreement with PROACT to provide pharmacy benefit management. And PROACT is our third-party administrator for our St. Lawrence County Pharmacy Plan, which includes developing and maintaining the formulary, contracting with pharmacies, negotiating discounts and rebates with drug manufacturers, and processing and paying prescription drug plans. Back in November, the board authorized the chair to sign a contract with USRX Care to provide prescription management, a prescription management program, which includes identifying prescription medications that have lower cost alternatives for plan participants and in turn the county. So PROACT now is requiring St. Lawrence County to sign a confidentiality agreement in order for PROACT to share the necessary information with USRX Care to implement the prescription management.
Okay. Any questions for Mrs. Dorothy concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a letter of acceptance with Redlich Horowitz Foundation to cover costs associated with foster parent certification and modifying the 2020 budget for social services. Moved by John Burt, second by Nicole Terminelli. We have Ms. Wenzel on the line, I believe.
Chris is here.
Oh, Chris is here. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, we are presenting the here, which has the authorization for the chair to sign a letter of acceptance for funding from the Redlich Horowitz Foundation in connection with the Family Services Act. This is a 2018 act that will help focus our attention on keeping children home with their families. This funding will be used to help with certification of kinship caregivers. There is a revenue number at the bottom that would be revised. The money would come straight from the Redlich Horowitz Foundation to the county. And the correct number would be DSG 128955500. The description is other general departmental income. Yes.
Okay, any questions for Chris concerning this resolution? Any discussion about Chris's impending retirement? Would anyone like to make some comments to Ms. Rediz? Okay. Renee says she can't retire. She's given the cut the throat thing. Anyone else?
Can we bribe them to stay?
Mr. Burt?
Chris, you've been a tremendous asset to the county. No one that I know of has the heart and the compassion that you have. And I, for one, been proud to associate with you, Chris, and thank you for all of your service.
You're too kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. Anyone else?
Can you see me?
Go ahead, Dave. Mr. Forsyth?
Chris, I remember the day you were hired, and I guess I'm going to remember the day you leave. I've said since day one, you've got the heart to do this job the right way. Congratulations to you. I hope you enjoy retirement, and good luck to you in the future. Good job.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
Anyone else? Do you have your hand up, Mr. Lightfoot?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay, Chris, I think perhaps there's reluctance on the part of some to speak up tonight because they've already, like myself, sent you a memory in the form of a video. But just for my own personal satisfaction, I'd like to say that you and I have banged heads before, and we have always come out of it, still friends, still working for what is best for the county. And you certainly exemplify that. And I gotta say that I don't think I've ever run into somebody who was so dedicated to their work as you are. You're to be commended. We'll miss you. You leave big shoes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are very kind and generous comments. And I'm honored to have been here serving with you.
Okay, I believe
I was just seeing the videos. I haven't seen them yet, but I so appreciate that.
I believe Mr. Denisha had his hand up. Is that true? Would you like to make some comments, Mr. Denisha?
Yeah, very, very quick. Chris, from a personal standpoint, I've enjoyed working with you. You're a professional in every manner. From a personal standpoint, I know I've had some folks that have needed assistance. I've called you, spoken with you about it. You've addressed things, and I wish I were there this evening to be able to shake your hand and say best of luck in the future. And thank you for all you've done for St. Lawrence County.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Would anyone else like to make any comments? I guess, Mr. Fay.
I'd just like to say thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Well, I guess, Chris, the rest of them want to see you go out the door, so I just think I want to thank you. You know how I feel about you. You've been a good friend, and the poor have never had a better advocate here in St. Lawrence County, and I wish you well. And your wife's a philosophy major. That could get a little dull. You might have to spice it up a little bit. So enjoy your time.
Thank you.
Okay. So as to the resolution, we've beat this up pretty good. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, on the business, our next resolution is amending the resolution number 24-2020 for bank depositories and investment of county funds. Moved by
Rita
Mr.
Kemp.
Lightfoot and second by Rita Curran and Rick Perkins. Okay, Renee? If you would.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you. So this amendment to resolution 24- is precipitated by the drastic changes in the financial markets, which means our banking and investment relationships have essentially changed overnight. The changes I'm recommending to the policy and resolution would give the treasurer the flexibility to maximize our county interest dollars. Investment rates change by the minute, and I, as treasurer, would be able to react accordingly in order to take advantage of the best opportunities available in any rate environment. They are pretty poor, but our earlier resolution is very stringent and won't allow us to maybe because it's restricted to banks. Some info I have on what's going on with the rates is at some point in 2019, we were able to earn over 1% in our bank accounts, regular key bank checking accounts. Today, that rate is just 0.01. So practically nothing on our inactive on the stuff that's just sitting in our operating accounts. So other information in November 15, when we began purchasing treasuries, we could get a 90-day treasury for 2.37%. Today, that rate is 0.04. So we're looking to start take advantage of CDs. Some of the, especially some of the smaller banks in New York State, less, not Key Bank getting away from some of the big corporate ones, more like community bank type stuff are a little slower in the market. So they're offering some decent. We just purchased one at Community Bank on Friday for 0.7, which is, it sure beats 0.04 on a treasury note. So the changes in here actually increased. That's reflected by some of the increases in the maximums. We want to be able to react to the depositories. We moved them from 2 million to 10 million, a number of banks that were on the original resolution. And we did add 3 more banks that are currently off rates. But there's some language further on that would possibly, if you approve this resolution, allow me to be able to deal with a bank that is authorized under municipal law for investment only, to take out a CD with them and then report at the next finance committee on those activities.
Okay.
All the changes that were
I
made.
got a
to it.
question.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cole. We have a question from Mr. Forsyth. Go ahead, Dave.
Renee, what's on the CDs? What sort of time commitment is there to them? 30 days, 6 months, what?
I think I think that anything's out there. We just did the note that the CD that we just purchased on Friday, we committed to a year to get that 0.7%. So
Okay,
right now,
time-
we have a lot of, we still have, thankfully, a good amount of money still outstanding in treasury notes that we're taking at a much higher rate that are going to produce some good income this year. But as they mature, it's what do we do? Where do we invest them? Because we're not going to get the 1.5% anymore.
And how much are you talking in a CD? How big a CD was it?
We took a $6 million CD. We did 6 million. That was the maximum. That was the maximum that they would let us do at that
Okay,
time.
but that's tied up for a year now.
Yes. Yes, right now, in general fund note, we have over $17 million in treasury notes. Maturing, the last one of those matures July 30th.
Okay.
So some are coming in April, there's one coming in May. Now, this is just the general fund, looking at for the operating.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Anyone else? John Burke, please. John?
Renee, the investments the schools use, I forget what it's called, and I know you were using it as well. How are their rates right now?
So they are starting to drop, and I didn't look today, but they're I can't compare them to the community bank, but because they're a blended, they take out a bunch of investments over time. So as their older ones mature and they're buying the newer ones, mesh together. Last I looked, it was still 1.3, but I think we can ride that out for about 30 days, and then that's going to be at the wall.
Mm. Well, I think it's great that you want the flexibility, and this is for the sake of county revenue. So I wholeheartedly support the resolution.
Anyone else? So Renee, with the amount of money that we have tied up and for however long this persists, this COVID-19, do we have the type of liquidity that we'll need to meet payroll without borrowing additional monies or pulling these monies out?
I don't foresee any problems this year. I mean, hopefully this COVID pandemic will resolve itself long before. I'd like it to happen, next month. This month would be great, but ideally, if this goes through the fall, even I don't anticipate it. We have a healthy fund balance, so we have, our fund balance really equals that's why we have the liquidity that we do right now. This is going to hurt us. I know, on this year's fund balance is where we're gonna, but cash wise, I think we're pretty strong.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay. Is it you?
So for the last vacancy review committee item of this month, we have a request from WIOA, and Barb Lashway is here with us.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you and your families are all well. We'd like to abolish the account clerk position and replace it with a principal account clerk so as to be better able to balance some of the fiscal oversight at the one stop. I'd like to also use this opportunity to establish some longevity within that position for the fiscal department, rather than having account clerks continually cycle in and out of the position. Quite often, somebody will stay for a short period of time, gain some experience, and then move on. Since I believe it is December, since this past December, we are basically left with one person in fiscal juggling everything and taking care of all the reports. Makes it kind of dicey in the event that somebody becomes ill. So I think it would help us to avoid having all our eggs in one basket if we were able to have a principal account clerk in that position rather than just an account clerk.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Ms. Lajoie about this position?
And the only other thing I would mention is we've seen an increase, Barb, you can echo this if I misstep, but we've seen an increase in the level of funding, which will help pay for this, and there's not a county cost attached to this. So they carefully looked at their budget. As you'll recall, they are on the July 1 to June 30th budget year. And so they were able to situate their funds such that it will completely pay for this position, like all of their positions are paid for.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, Barb, you're free to sign off. We're just going to keep going with our agenda if you'd like.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
And I think, do you want to send the opportunity department heads on sign off? Is it done?
Sure. So any of the department heads that are participating, you don't really have that much left. If you'd like to join your families and sign off, that may be fine. So thanks for doing what you're doing for us. Good night, everybody. So next up is our county administrator's report.
Yes.
Mrs. Doyle.
So certainly I want to start tonight with a COVID-19 update. I wanted to mention to you the folks that are joining us, whether you can see them or you can't. We have Renee continuing on with us. She is present also with Vicki Stiles from her office. If there are any tax questions, as there's been some email traffic about that. Matt Denner is here with us also for the emergency services. We've had some activity and some deliveries he can speak to. The sheriff has joined us also tonight, as well as Nicole Conant, who is the chief of staff for the president's office at SUNY Potsdam. So I wanted to walk down through, if there's no objection first, to where we are. And then expand the conversation to answer your questions. I know that many of you are receiving contact on a variety of levels, and make sure that when we separate tonight, that you have confidence in what the county's doing, and also that if you have questions that have not been answered, that we can run those down for you. So there's a lot of moving parts. The numbers change by the time we hit send on the email to you, but we want to make sure that you get all the information that you need. So I want to start with where we are. The first case in New York was diagnosed 29 days ago. And New York State began hosting daily calls on March 5th. So they've held 25 calls so far, including today. New York State declared a state of emergency on March 7th. And beginning on March 12th, executive orders, which there are 13 in place at this time, began issuing executive orders every 2 days until the 19th, and they issued them every day until the 23rd, the 27th, the 28th, and even today, the 30th. So we've been taking some time, having County Attorney Button review these, talk with Matt Denner about the implications of these and any that they apply to, and making sure that we're following and complying with state law. We worked with the schools over the March 14th and 15th weekend, which resulted in the schools closing effective March 16th. And that's just been updated that they will remain closed until April 15th. Chair Lightfoot declared a state of emergency in St. Lawrence County at 12:01 on Monday, March 16th. And on the same day, we activated the Emergency Operations Center for 4 hours per day that entire week. Following that week, we moved it up to 8 hours a day, and we've stayed there since. Executive Order 202.4 required local governments to immediately reduce workforces to 50%. And your department heads quickly pulled together staff reduction plans that each reviewed with me before they implemented. They deployed existing technology and identified areas in needing of attention, whether it be IT needs or purchasing needs or phone needs. They've gone above and beyond to meet the needs of the public. The additional guidance that was released in 202.7 was a bit unclear, but it called for reductions of staff up to 25 or down to 25%. However, later on that was clarified to include businesses. However, in the structure that we have now, our balance on any given day is between 25 and 50% with those folks working from home. So we're at this in a variety of ways, which I'll talk about in a minute. By Friday, March 20th, where possible, the office density was reduced as much as possible, and as I mentioned, between 25 and 50% on any given day. On March 23rd, as I mentioned, we expanded those hours of the EOC at 8 to 4, and it's been maintained since then. So far, they've logged 92 hours in operation. And in the EOC at this time, emergency services, planning, the sheriff's office, New York State Police, public health, and typically representation of the district deputy coordinators from EMS are present. They answer phones, they help deploy supplies, and they help with request intakes. Last week, the Red Cross made a presence, and this week, we're changing to identify a dedicated line to community services, and we're requesting they have a presence in the EOC as well. Understanding that the exacerbation of symptoms during the extension of these conditions that we are experiencing. The first confirmed case in St. Lawrence County, as you'll recall last week, was on March 25th. We were the 52nd county and the same day as Franklin County to have our first case. The order of cases, as you've been tracking and following along, went from 1, then 3 more, then 2 more, then 5 more, then 7 more, and today 6 more, to take our number to 23. All are recuperating at home, with the exception of the 5 on campus at SUNY Potsdam. The chair appointed the Coronavirus Response Work Group at the board meeting. The first meeting was held on March 11th, and since that time, following the practices we've put into place, phone calls have taken the meeting place. And there have been 12 meetings every day of the week. The Coronavirus Response Work Group meets at 10 o'clock. On March 22nd, as the owner of the transportation service, noted as the college connector and service to the 2 SUNY campuses, Clarkson and St. Lawrence, was suspended. We continue reviewing the overall service provided and may consider suspension if matters warrant such a consideration. In order to do that, we would request state approval because that's been designated as an essential service, as well as we would provide notice for the folks who continue to take transportation to make alternative arrangements. Our understanding is that participation has dropped to approximately 25%. Our workforce has adapted tremendously. The work from home, the alternative and the rotating schedules, Zoom meetings and check-ins are a new way of running county government. Today is our first live stream of committee to be open and transparent to the public, no matter what we're doing. This week, we're going to continue following up with phone and technology needs. We're training county staff from other departments to assist public health. We're bringing in volunteers, and we're reviewing the Citizen Corps arranged for emergency preparedness in emergency services. The last couple of weeks, we've spent some time, and I emailed the legislators today in sharing the communication that we've made with the Amish. We sent along some materials to be shared at their church gatherings, as well as deputies at Sheriff Bigworth's request delivered to 20 Amish schools by the end of last week. Today in New York State, the total is 66,497. In New York City, the total is 37,453. As a reminder, the current state of emergency will expire on April 14th in St. Lawrence County. We may ask to renew, and certainly we'll get Department of Health consideration for that before we ask the chair to authorize an extension. And finally, I just want to mention, before we go into questions, that these individuals have done nothing wrong. They have just become sick.
Any questions for our county administrator by anyone?
So if we'd like to, I think Nicole has a
Okay.
question.
Ms. Terminelli, I'm sorry.
Hi, just a couple of things. Do we have an account set up that specifically that we're using to fund and track any COVID expenses to make reimbursement from either the state or federal government more seamless?
So last week, Renee and Deb and I had our first Zoom meeting and identified, I believe, 5 departments to begin with, where we would track and have a project code COVID, where we would begin tracking those expenses. So any of those that have already occurred, because as we began and needed to ramp up, some of those expenses were paid for out of the department lines, and we'll be working with the treasurer's office to have those expenses moved so we can track them under COVID. And later this week, FEMA will be hosting a conference call with some at least preliminary instructions on how we should do that. So I've asked the budget team to attend that as well.
And as a follow-up, oops, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Nicole.
Sorry. I believe at our last meeting at that time, it was $31,197. I believe that Dana had said that we had received for COVID funding. Is that number still the same, or has there been any additional funding received?
Dana?
Dana, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
No, we have not received any more funding.
Okay.
Renee, but you have, Ms. Cole, you'd like to make a comment? You must be, Renee, you must be muted. Okay, we can't hear you yet.
There we go. There.
There you are.
Sorry about
Okay.
that. No, when we met on Zoom, Ruth and Deb Bridges, my deputy, and I, we had the discussion about setting the accounts throughout the departments. We also sent an email to communicate to the department to let us know what accounts they're, where they anticipate they're going to be spending in, and at least set up the project codes and get things charged there in anticipation that we'll be receiving some revenue through FEMA or the state or some other method.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burke? John, go ahead.
Just a question. Are we able to project spread like the state does and the federal government does? I mean, Ruth, you said our first case was March 25th. We're up to 23 now. Just wondering if there have been any projections as to what we might be looking at a week from now or 2 weeks from now.
Dana, did you want to speak to that?
I can. We don't have any projections. The increase we've seen in the last 5 days is a lot higher than we expected. At this time, it's all around St. Lawrence County. So, we haven't found really any, sort of trend. I mean, it's from travel, it's from person to person. So no, we don't have any estimates at this time.
Thank you, Dana. John, does that answer your question?
Well, I guess as best as it could be answered. Thank you, Dana. Yeah.
So we have our sheriff, Brooks Bigworth, and Matt Denner here. Brooks, would you like to make some comments in the public part of this meeting?
Yes, I would. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the jail because I'm sure some of you are wondering what's going on, what we've done. And I've tried to do everything we can to minimize exposure because if it gets in there, we're going to have some issues, obviously. Just to recap, we have 62 inmates currently in our facility as of today, 54 males, 8 females. We have 1 CO that's off. That's not due to the virus, but she is being self-quarantined for some other issues. All of our officers in the jail are equipped with PPEs. Everything's done on that end. We've done some pod restructuring where our Delta pod is the only pod people that are initially coming in will go to that pod only and no other part of the jail. They stay there for 14 days. Once they pass the 14 days, we then put them into some other pods in the facility. I only have 5 inmates left in Delta pod, so that's good news. Also in Delta pod, we have what we call the SHU. It's an area of containment where we have 4 cells. So if we do get some sort of virus in there, someone confirmed, we will put them in the SHU area, and we've checked it for negative pressure air, and everything checks out. So the air coming in there is going to be ventilated outside and not into the facility any further. So we put that intact. I'm also working with the county judge and probation and the district attorney's office to try to get some of our pre-sentenced inmates out of the facility. We put them under an ankle bracelet or something, RUS them under probation. I'm currently working with a probation director, but his wife had an issue, so he's been off the last few days, so we're trying to make that happen. The parole part of our jail, we have parole holds. We had 13 about 2 weeks ago. The state has lifted 3 so far that have been released. We're working on more to get more of the 10 out. We're trying to minimize the inmate population as much as possible. Our sentenced inmates, we have 3 more that will time out by the end of this week. So we will be down to 59 if we don't get any additional people. And we're trying to get some staff changes where we can get coverage in case we do get something in the jail population, whether it be through the COs or the inmates themselves, where we're going to switch to 12-hour shifts for some COs to try to minimize contact. Other things we've done at the jail is we have no contact visitation. That's been implemented for the last 2 or 3 weeks. We are following all CDC guidelines for sanitation of the facility. We've got all the proper signage throughout the facility for symptoms and prevention measures. We've implemented best practice for social distancing for the staff and inmates, although sometimes with the inmates, it's a little harder than the staff, and we were always trying to get them to separate. It's a tough task to try to get them all separated. Anybody that goes in our facility, that means anybody that includes myself, my administration, jail administrator, or assistant jail administrator, any maintenance people, anybody that goes into that jail is screened and tested for their temperature, or they don't get admitted. And we obviously have kind of curtailed that quite a bit. So the pretrial inmates are getting looked at, as I said, by the probation department. Other than that, that's pretty much what we're doing at the jail. And I'll talk about the road patrol and the civil in a second, but I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions about what I'm doing with the jail and the jail personnel so far.
Any questions for the sheriff? Seeing, I have one question. We are getting calls from constituents about state inmates. It's not your prerogative that state inmates are being brought up to our facilities. Do you have any comment or have any knowledge, or if that's the protocol that's happening, or is it just rumor?
No, we're trying not to have that happen. I have a individual actually from Marcy that's down in their mental institution holding cell that they're trying to bring back to my jail, and I'm fighting it tooth and nail. We don't get any state inmates. Again, we get parolees, and I've talked to several parolees and the supervisors, a regional supervisor, about stopping their technical violations. And they're pretty much curtailed that back the last couple of weeks. But there are going to be people that are going to be committed to our jail. I can't stop putting some people in. There's people that need to go to jail. But I'm trying to minimize some of the ones that we can hopefully get under probation or stay out on the technical violation for parole. But we don't have any other state coming in. We do have some that are sentenced to the state facilities, and they're not taking any state readies right now. So we're going to probably, if this releases, we'll get down to maybe 4 or 5 as soon as it ends, that we'll be shipping out real quick.
Okay, thank you. Talk to us about your road patrol there.
So we're manning, as Ruth indicated, we're always at the EOC with an officer there to coordinate and help with anything they need to have done. We're doing a lot of things out there that probably people don't know about. Maybe they do. We're delivering a lot of supplies for public health or anybody else that needs supplies delivered. Handling any business violations. We probably had about, on average, 12 this past week that we check on bars and taverns that aren't in compliance with the directives from the governor. Most people, we just educate them and there's a positive outcome. We've only done a couple in the last few days, so I think the word is getting out there that they're only certain things are supposed to be open. And we're cognizant that they still have to operate. And we feel that if they operate under the rules, they'll be fine. And we just want to make sure nobody's cross-contaminating each other. So we're out there assisting them with education, and we've had no issues with anybody so far. We can also assist with contact tracing with the public health. As Ruth said, we're in the Amish community because obviously they don't have any televisions or videos or computers out there. We're not only into their schools that we've talked to, but we're going out to the bishops and trying to educate them on trying to not have a lot of people come. Wedding we had to talk to a bishop about last week, some things like that. So we are out there helping. For most of you guys know, I've got the Sheriff app we just launched. It has a lot of good information. I've got a lot of good feedback. If you need something on there you want out to the public, just call my undersheriff and we'll try to get that either through a news release or notification banner. If something needs to be put out there immediately. I think quite a few people are using this. But we're still handling all complaints out there in the road patrol. We are doing still some transports. Family court is fully operational for the most part. So we are doing some. We're trying to scale it back. We're working right now on getting video arraignments for the county court. We're working on that. So we hope to have that implemented by next week. We have parole that are also going to be video conferencings when they come in. So there's no cross-contamination there. And our staff, when they come in, are also being screened and tested. So when they walk in the door, they're being screened and tested. I have one deputy that's in quarantine. Well, hopefully by Friday, we'll know what's going on. But obviously, if I get that in my patrols, it might spread quite rapidly. So we want to make sure we do everything. One thing I want to talk about that's coming out through the Attorney General and the federal Attorney Generals, we're going to start seeing some scams. Hate to say that. We see the best in humanity through these things, and sometimes we see the worst. I just got a couple correspondents from the federal and state Attorney General that I'll be working with hand in hand to make sure that we don't have this. I'll be putting a news release out here in the next couple of days. If people feel they're getting scammed or they don't know if it's a scam or not, to make sure they contact our office, and we'll filter all those out. It's very important that the community and the public be able to contact us so we can help them in every way. So that's our road patrol. Any questions on road patrol?
Anybody got any questions for the sheriff? No, thank you very much, Sheriff Brooks. Appreciate it. We do have Matt Denner, our Emergency Services Director. Matt, would you like to make some comments?
Good evening, everybody. Like I said, we got, I'll start with my department. When we started first, I met with Ruth and I made the decision to lock dispatch down. We closed all the doors on both ends. We're keeping them locked up inside the room. We did have Wells come in and made some adjustments so we can able to do some work out of Messina. They're coming back tomorrow morning. As of Wednesday morning, we will be operating both out of Messina and Canton. We'll be keeping 2 in each location. If that way we can get people switched in and out of Messina, and it kind of keeps the separation down and everybody can get familiar with the equipment in Messina. If there's any bugs, we still have people to work on things in Canton. They're doing good. We've had a few people, calling sick, regular, nothing out of the ordinary. They're all doing good. We're sterilizing their workstations before they come on and before they leave. EOC, Ruth touched base when the EOC opened. We're doing well over there. We do have a lot of tables that are being filled. As the requests come in, we were logging them all in for medical supplies. Then when we finally started getting some medical supplies, which our first shipment came in Saturday evening, we worked Sunday, getting some out and getting a lot of invoices ready to get it out. And then today we put 23 invoices out today, which would be to different healthcare facilities, urgent cares, and first responders. We did have a little bit of a hiccup with a couple of agencies are scared. They don't want to go when they hear the protocol 36. They get nervous. Nobody wants to bring this home to their family, and we get it. We did have a recommendation to them that if you don't have to go on a call that comes up, a protocol 36, which is a COVID call, then just be on standby. Transporting agencies are going to be there. So if the first responders don't, but if it is a serious call where there is in need of critical medical people to be on scene right away, they are responding with the proper PPE. All the departments do have PPE. They were given the bare minimum in the beginning. We do have a little bit more. We're starting to get them a little couple more backup masks and stuff like that. With the equipment that's coming in, kind of looks like the state is going to be sending us a shipment once a week. They asked for all the burn rates of all the facilities, healthcare, urgent cares, long-term, first responders. And we got all those numbers and sent them in Saturday morning. And then kind of what we've been talking after the conference call today is once a week, they're going to be rolling a shipment out. And we are currently looking together or partnering up with our neighboring counties. So when they come up, they can hit all of us at the same time.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Mr. Denner? Yes, Mr. Burke. Go ahead, John.
Matt, what is the protocol if someone calls in to dispatch with symptoms that are suspect of the COVID virus? What happens?
All right. When in the beginning, we do get a list from public health of the people that are in quarantine. We do add it into our system, the Spillman system. So the list gets shared with myself, and myself and the senior dispatcher have been putting it in. So when the dispatcher takes a call, they have to punch the address in on the CAD system, and there'll be a flag pop up, and it'll say, before it was saying COVID-19 flag, now it says protocol 36. So we notify the first responders. Instead of saying COVID over the radio, we tell them it's protocol 36, the landline dispatch. When they landline, we let them know, hey, we've got a flag of somebody's quarantined in that residence. They don't know a name, don't know who or anything else, but they know someone's quarantined in the residence. If somebody calls and it's somebody that we don't have on our list, what happens is every call gets screened with the questions on COVID-19. And if they answer yes to any of them, it goes on and it keeps going on until we do page that call out again as protocol 36. Landline dispatch, first responders will landline dispatch. We explain to them, hey, these are the questions we asked. This is how they answered. Also with your active 911 systems, when they get the calls to their phones, it lists the questions on there and it also lists their answers on there.
So Matt, if I could, Kevin, ask a follow-up.
Yes, go ahead, John.
So if you get if you receive a call and you've asked the questions, help screen virus, what happens? I mean, is there any other diversion from the first responders, or do you just basically share the information that you've obtained with the first responders, and then it's up to them? I guess I'm wondering if there is any medical intervention prior to pickup or transport and I think maybe early on it might have called for an emergency medical director, but I guess it would be helpful knowing at least if there is something in the system, something in the process that might channel a phone call to a medical professional to give a second opinion as to whether a pickup is needed or not.
Yeah, everybody is told in the beginning that you should contact your healthcare provider. That's what people call the EOC during the day. They say, hey, I got this, I got that. We tell them you should contact them. But when they do call 911, like I said, the questions are asked. We can't turn anybody down. If somebody wants to go to the hospital, we transport them to the hospital. Like I said, we limit the exposure so we don't let first responders go if they don't have to. But if some medical intervention has to be made, they do make it. They take the call just like it would anybody else. Yes, they would use precautions with the shield, with a mask and a gown, but they have to treat it just like anything else. If it's a cardiac call, if it's a difficulty breathing or whatever it is, they still do the same interventions. They do have med control. Every ambulance has a cell phone and a radio where they can call a doctor that's on call 24/7 and get some advice if they need to.
Okay, does that answer your question, John, as best as we can?
Yeah, I think so, Kevin. I'm a little concerned that maybe our diversion isn't quite as strong as it could be. The idea that we would ask any first responders to transport, especially if the symptoms are such that they could be transported by either transport themselves or be transported by a family member living in the same house. And I don't know what the nature of the calls have been, if we've even received any, but I certainly think it's important to protect first responders as well as ER staff certainly by alerting them to what's going on, and it sounds like that's being done. But I'm just not sure that it sounds like the diversion is strong enough. My personal feeling is that if somebody could transport themselves, if they've got the dry cough, they've got a headache, or they've got a fever, if they're able to transport themselves or have a family member transport them, we could simply notify the ER, and it would save a whole lot of contact with people that are vulnerable.
I agree with the diversion. It could be a little bit better, but we've never been in the practice of that. Somebody calls, they've always transported. I mean, scrape your knee. Nose, they've always gone to these calls and transported them. I can't, don't think we really should give any kind of guidance to them to say, hey, I can't tell my dispatchers, if you feel they don't need a transport, then, tell them they can go themselves. The liability in that would be huge.
Matt, to your knowledge, and maybe you can't answer it because of HIPAA laws, have we transported, been involved, emergency services been involved with transporting any of the current 25 COVID-19s? Or have they all been determined, tested in their own location or their doctor's office,
We had a call over the weekend that the guy said he tested positive and the address was flagged in our system as somebody quarantined.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Denner? Okay.
We'll do the tax question next.
Pardon me?
Do the tax questions next. And then
Yes,
Vicky, you're up.
so, okay.
Can we speak to it?
So yes, Ruth wants to talk about the tax questions. Go ahead.
So there were a variety of email threads circulating amongst the legislators about options available with regard to tax collection. As you know, St. Lawrence County does have an installment plan. Some folks choose to pay all of their taxes in January, and I've asked Renee and her deputy, Vicky, are here tonight that they could speak to the process we have in place, as well as what the options look like for the board. Renee or Vicky?
Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I talked to Vicky. I had to talk with Vicky today to quiz her a little bit about this because taxes are not my specialty, and Vicky's been in the office doing this for at least 20 years, I think. So I'm glad that she is online with us. I guess some of the problems that or the reason how to answer you is I'm not certain exactly what the questions were. They were kind of generic and a little bit, I think really what you were looking for is whether or not we could extend the deadline to pay, that April 1st, I think is a big deadline for people. My understanding is that is something only the governor can actually give permission to do. I think last year for a winter storm event I think some requested it, and either the chair of the board or maybe the county administrator had to send a letter to the governor requesting it and get that granted. And I think the maximum for that was an extension. And I know that Mr. Button is here and he can correct me if I have that wrong.
We'll have Mr. Button address that right now.
Okay.
No, our treasurer is actually correct. Under real property tax law, section 925A, if the chief executive or the chief elected for a county makes a formal request to the governor can actually, even retroactively, apply a stay on the collection and enforcement of the tax date for up to 21 days. And that did in fact occur last year for Colton. We had an emergency order that was issued, Executive Order 194, that did in fact extend the collection deadline for taxes in the town of Colton for a 21-day period, and it was retroactively applied.
Okay. Oh,
Any questions from board members concerning Renee or Mr. Button's comments?
I got one.
Okay, Mr. Forsythe.
Are there any other counties that are doing this or talking about doing this, or have we heard?
Renee or Stephen? Go ahead, Renee.
As far as other county treasurers, I have seen none of them have spoken to these are pursuing that 21-day extension. I mean, it doesn't mean it's not in the works, but there's been other discussion, which was the other item that I did have some information on, is interest. I think some of them are looking at possibly waiving the April interest.
Yes.
That would be the April interest on the current county taxes.
Okay.
You know, there's a 1% interest that is left on the unpaid 2020 taxes. And it's kind of a mixed bag as far as the treasurers go on that. Some of the counties are opting to not do anything at all. Actually, I have a little list: Cattaraugus, Portland, Allegheny, Orleans. They're not canceling any. Cayuga is canceling the 1% interest in April. And Madison is only collecting, I'm sorry, not Madison, I have that. Clinton is looking at a 1% on the March installment coupon. So everybody handles their taxes a little bit differently. But in St. Lawrence County, our collectors all submit a renewal warrant so that they actually, our towns collect taxes until June 1st. So we don't actually receive the unpaids until June 2nd. And any interest that they collect during that period, that end of March through June 1st, the towns keep the interest on. So I'm not certain that we have the authority to exactly their revenue.
Yeah.
Okay, my understanding, Dave, does that answer your question, or you have a follow up?
Well, I'm just thinking about that 21-day deadline. That would take it out another 21 days. Is that what you're saying, Renee?
Yes,
If we were to
past
do
March
that?
31st. I think,
Okay.
I think when we looked at the day, it ended up being April 20. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. Yeah, it puts it into the last week if we do.
Well, the tax, the installment would be due tomorrow. We probably could gather information as to how many defaulted on that too. My understanding, Rita Curran has her hand up. Rita, would you have a question for Renee or Stephen?
Well, just being that we, I think we're the 6th most poverty-stricken county in the state, but there's a lot of people in our area that have contacted me whose business and or job has been affected by this virus. A lot of people are out of work. So they're wondering how this is going to affect their, will they get any sort of a break with this tax collection? Because there are really people who live paycheck to paycheck. And like I said, I probably had half a dozen calls the first day and then a couple here and there the day after, wondering what we're going to do.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rita. Mr. Denisha, you have your hand up, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the subject, I had received a number of calls in regards to the taxes, the installments, and I had actually sent a letter or an email to Renee asking her, and she responded back that the St. Lawrence County's been advised that the tax deadlines are set by New York State. We don't have the authority to change them. So I actually penned a letter to Ken Blankenbush Mark Walzek, Joe Griffo, Patty Ritchie, Betty Little, Robert Smullen, and copied Graham Wise, Brian Peck, and Brian Ady. You know, in regards to you know, asking them if there was anything that we talked about it, and I asked them if there was any way that they could consider calling for an extension of the deadline dates, as it would be a significant help to a great number of our hardworking taxpayers. And you know, it was very dismaying because I heard crickets. I heard nothing, and finally, you know, with the help of actually with the help of Ms. Arquette, I did hear something, and then I received I received another email this afternoon from Reed Kinderman from Joe Griffo's office, and you know, and I don't think you know, and I listened to the address this afternoon for the Onondaga County Executive, and the same question came up, and he said, you know, he said the only the way we have bills to pay, and the only way we pay our bills is with their taxes, you know, and but there are people that there are on installments. It's going to be a tough time for them to make that installment payment. If they've got the money and they're not working, they pay the tax, they're going to, that money could go somewhere else. Maybe it's food, fuel, gasoline, whatever. So I think in absence of any action by New York State, that if we could, I think if we could forgive any fines and penalties in St. Lawrence County, and I'm not sure how long it would be, but I think I'm very disappointed the state has done nothing. And I think if we can do anything at the county level, we should. Thank you.
Mr. Button would like to address this.
Mr. Denisha, I think the board is completely aware, as it has exercised this power before, that it has, in evaluating certain individual properties, previously waived the interest, penalties, and fees associated with the collection of taxes on certain parcels. That is still a possibility for this board in the future. That is not time sensitive and could be assessed after the conclusion of the emergency that's going on. I will note that currently there is an executive order that is in place from the governor's office that does not permit our county to exercise any emergency authority that has not previously been approved by the Department of Health of the state if it is in relation to the COVID-19 outbreak. So a blanket forgiveness of interest, penalties, and fees that may occur at this point related to COVID-19 may be viewed as a utilization of our emergency powers and exceed that which we can currently do. My recommendation at this point to the board would be to wait until the emergency has effect moved forward, and then reassess the impact of waiver of the interest, penalties, and fees for those individuals that this impacted during that time period, if the board is so inclined.
Any comments anyone would like to make? I can't. Go ahead, Rita. Oh, I'm sorry, Renee.
Well, with regards to what Steve just said, I'm not certain, Steve. It sounds to me like if the towns right now in April and May and until June are collecting at that, and when people collect, that is when they charge the 1% interest. I don't know if what you're saying will actually accomplish what the legislators are actually asking for, because to me, the individual boards may need to act on that 1%.
I do not disagree, Renee, but I think the concern that I have is that right now, under the prohibition of us executing our own emergency declarations without the permission of DOH, what would theoretically have to occur would be that we would put a prospective stay in the collection on the interest, penalties, and fees. I'm not sure that the board currently has the legal authority to do so under the restrictions that we have. Okay. So the only way that I can assess this right now is through a retroactive action. And I think that's what I was trying to propose to the board, was to think about this in terms of what we can do looking back rather than what we may be able to do prospectively right now, given the fact that our hands are tied by the state executive order.
Mr. Denisha.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Steve, are you suggesting, and I believe this is what you're suggesting, that we stay the course and we see whatever the fines and penalties might be when this is over, and then we can make our decision as to eliminate the fines, penalties, or some portion thereof.
Okay, anyone else?
Mr. Denisha, that was correct.
Okay, thank you.
I can't wait for that conversation.
Yeah, so I think the payments are actually due tomorrow, and we can probably analyze the data, actually, who did not make their payments, and we can see, what kind of impact it had. I mean, it has been 2 weeks that essentially that people have been out of work with the emergency declaration. So we can take a look at the data and react at that particular time.
Great.
So thank you for your concerns. I'd like to move on now to Dana McGuire with our COVID-19 report. Dana? Okay, we can't hit. Do you have your mute button on, Dana?
Not anymore. So as you know, we have 23 cases today. There was a report last night that 5 SUNY students are positive. Just want to make note that only 4 of those will be counted in our county. When you get tested, the address that goes onto the lab report sometimes is where the person lives if they're a college student. And so therefore that lab report, while it goes back to the provider, it goes to the county where that person lives. So it won't be counted here, but we do the isolation process here. So we'll be isolating all 5 of those students, and they'll be on SUNY campus, but it's our office that will be checking in with them twice daily. Since we've had such a great increase in the last 5 days, we have really tried to shift our staff around. We're now going to be working just all days of the week. We are looking for some help from the other departments, and we do have some of the volunteers coming in, so we're trying to restructure ourselves. And I'm trying to take a look at how we're structuring that, because we are still just working in the office so we can coordinate all of the work that goes into the case finding. So what happens when we get a new case is we do an investigation, and we learn all of the contacts that that person may have had since the symptoms started. So from there, we make a list of those contacts, and then we have staff that then contact those. Some of the cases have 1 to 2, some might have more than 50. So that has really kind of just increased the workload. And then besides that, we do all of the monitoring for those who are in quarantine and those who are in the isolation process. So just to refresh you, you're in a quarantine process when you've been exposed, and then when you test positive, that's what moves you over into the isolation process. If you're in the precautionary, we only have to contact you once per day, and the state does have it's a texting type of a system. So if the individual does agree to go into that system, they can get a text, they answer the questions, and then we just have to make sure that they do a respond to that, because if they don't respond to the text, then we still make a call. If they're in the mandatory quarantine or into the isolation, then we have to call them just one other day, and it has to be by FaceTime so that we can see them. We are learning each day that there's some new state guidance just with regards to the quarantine process, to the isolation process. And now there's some new guidance on like the essential workers. So if you've been exposed, but you're not showing like any of the symptoms, you can still just continue to work so that we can keep the workforce. And so then we're required to keep a log of those employees, and they need to be monitored each day that they go into work. So that's just another piece that we're trying to keep all kind of consistent. We are working on just trying to get all of the cases for the county mapped. So we're working with the planning office, and I think the first map should come out for like tomorrow afternoon. Can I answer any other questions for you?
Before you do, I just want to say that we have Nicole Connett, who is SUNY Potsdam. She is the Chief of Staff for President Esterberg. I've been in contact with her, and we've invited her. She's offered to be here today, and we've invited her, and I don't know if you can see her on your screen. She's on my screen. I know many of you, at least I have gotten calls about what the colleges are doing after today's revelation of 5 actual COVID-19 cases. So if you have any questions for Dana, you can ask those at that time, and certainly we'll offer a chance for Ms. Connett to make some comments or answer any questions that you may have. So first of all, does anyone have any questions for Dana? Ms. Arquette.
Yes, Dana, I'm wondering if I've asked this question before, but I'm wondering if you can give more clarification to speak to again. I've seen a lot of people with what I believe is misinformation. If you have a child who tests positive for COVID, and how that child is isolated or quarantined. And I think the misinformation is that if you have a child who tests positive, that isolation means that they are not with the parent.
Yeah. So we always try to do quarantine or isolation process at home. That's always what we try to do. So as long as we can find the location to have a separate bedroom and a separate bathroom, and you can maintain yourself to be separated from the rest of the household, you would stay at home. In the case of a child, that would be the same. And then there is also then just a parent that could quarantine with the child so that they are with the child. So we would quarantine both the child and the parent. So the child is not moved from the home or not moved away from the parents.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Burke, you have a question for Dana?
Well, maybe Dana and Nicole. I guess I'm wondering, do we have any process of screening the number of people that are coming into the county? Like thinking of the universities, they probably, that's in a normal year, I'm assuming that prospective students would be coming in, touring the campus. And I guess I'm just wondering, based on our recent experience, do we have any, are we monitoring who's coming in and from where they're coming? I mean, is there that level of cooperation with the 4 universities so that if we were, you know, and again, I don't know what their calendars look like, but I'm assuming that this time of the year they would be actively recruiting in a normal year. And I guess I'm wondering if we're doing anything prophylactically to delay the movement into our county from some of the hot spots.
Ms. Connett, would you like to go first?
Sure.
And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So if I could just, I'll answer your question, but if I could just take a step back and provide some broader information, which will lead into your specific question, Mr. Burke. So as Mr. Akers mentioned, my name is Nicole Conant, and I'm the Chief of Staff at SUNY Potsdam. I'm here tonight as I oversee government and community relations. So I have received individual calls from many of you. Thank you for reaching out. Certainly, it's understandable that people are scared. We want to equip them with the information. We know that there's a lot of rumors floating and a lot of inaccurate information. So when we quickly realized that this was becoming fast-paced, President Esterberg charged what we're calling the Coronavirus Task Force, and also an academic subcommittee of that task force. We work closely with SUNY System Administration, being a public institution, and also the state. We follow daily guidance. As many of you have said, we're living our lives around Governor Cuomo's press conferences and what time those will be during the day. And so Governor Cuomo, one of the first things that he did was asked all SUNYs and CUNYs, so there are 64 SUNY campuses, to move to distance learning for the rest of the semester. And that's, when we say distance learning, it's a variety. It's asynchronous, it's online classes, but no face-to-face classes. So we did have the option of having labs, but chose to just move completely to distance learning. One of the things that he said on his press conference was that we could not evict students from our residence halls. So at first, residence halls were open. That was our messaging to students. As things started to change and there was more and more cases in New York State, that guidance changed, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Currently, our faculty and staff are mostly all working from home to help with the density. Our facilities are closed, so Maxey Hall, our fitness center, is closed. Our academic buildings are all locked. To answer your question, Mr. Burke, we are not doing any face-to-face academic tours or admission tours, excuse me. We're doing things virtually. So we're trying to engage students virtually until we know when we'll be able to invite students to campus. With that, they have encouraged us to move our admissions deadline so that way high school students are not negatively impacted. So as far as the residence halls, because I know that's a hot topic with many people, I just want to set the stage that we had about 1,545, that's not about, it was the exact number actually, of students who were living in our residence halls. And so again, the directive was we can't evict students. Then the directive was, okay, we're going to highly discourage students from coming to help stop the spread. And we were only allowed to have students who had a hardship. And so our students were invited to the hardship application. It was either that they were an international student and couldn't go back to, let's say Italy, because there's no in or out. They had nowhere else to go. Homeless students who aged out of foster care. And then the third area was a student who may not have technology in order to complete their classes. So a student from St. Lawrence County who lives in an area who doesn't have Wi-Fi internet to their home wouldn't be able to complete their studies. So they completed an application. So as of right now, we have 85 students who have been approved to stay on campus, most of whom never left over spring break. So we had our traditional spring break, and then we did an extended spring break as we're trying to get our courses online and all of that. So of those 85 students, we have approximately 25 who did return to the area. And so our student health was proactive and has been working very closely with the public health department. And we decided to offer testing to all of those students to be proactive. So you may have seen in the news that 5 of our students did test positive. 4 were asymptomatic. So that's kind of an anomaly because usually you get tested when you have symptoms. And then one of the students had mild cold symptoms. So our student health department is working very closely with Dana and her team. And thank you, Dana. You have been absolutely amazing. I can't imagine being in your shoes right now. I know every time I text or call, you're right there. So that's greatly appreciated. So the students are in their own bedroom, own bathroom. We're delivering food to them, so that way we only have one dining place open on campus, but it's grab and go, and we'll deliver their meal to their door. We're following all of the CDC guidelines for cleaning and disinfection. So that's our residential students. As far as our off-campus students, I do know that some have expressed concern. They are, residents of Potsdam and the surrounding towns. We have asked them to follow the New York State on Pause guidelines and let them know that they're risking getting civil fines or college sanctions if they're violating the social gathering and other things under that New York State on Pause. Certainly, we'll investigate any other gatherings that put people at risk, but we're trying to model that. We've postponed our commencement ceremony. We're not doing any of our loved Crane School of Music concerts. So we're trying to model to our students. Off campus, one of the things that we're doing right now is I'm wrapping up an inventory of supplies that we have on our campus. We have PPE supplies, gloves, masks. We've been reached out by United Helpers and other organizations. So to Matt and your team, I will have an inventory hopefully over the next day of supplies that we can then deploy out to community organizations. So we've looked at our 3D printer to see how we can make ventilator parts. Just waiting on the file in order for those to start printing. So we're really invested in the community and really want to work together. We've also raised our hands that if we get to a situation where St. Lawrence County is out of ICU beds, that we can convert some of our residence halls into beds. We have Maxi Hall, which is a very large open space. So we want to work together and appreciate the opportunity to come to give information. I'm happy to take any questions that people may have.
Ms. Arquette.
Yes, you said you did 85 tests. Is that correct?
No, so we had 85 students who are currently living on campus. Of those, around 20 to 25 came back from a high-risk area. As of, I think it was yesterday, we've completed about 20 tests so far.
Okay, so you only those that were tested were from the high-risk areas?
Correct, as a precaution, right?
Thank you.
Mr. Burke.
Nicole, are any of the students coming back to pack up their possessions from their on-residence rooms, or has that already been completed? I'm just curious about the movement in and out of the community.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm trying to think of my dates here. We did the weekend that New York State on Pause was shared, and it was effective Sunday night, I believe at 8 or midnight. Students were allowed to come back and get their belongings, but what we did is had them sign up for a time in advance. So we did 4-hour windows at where the student lived, was somebody checking out next to them on the floor in the building to encourage social distancing. So we were monitoring that all weekend. We had about 200 students who had moved out over the course of that weekend. But again, we staggered them to make sure that they weren't in mass amounts. Since then, as of Sunday night with the governor's directive, we did tell students that they were no longer able to come back. If they had medicine or a laptop or a textbook in their residence halls, that we would work with them to ship that out to them. But until they heard from us, they should not be coming to campus.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So Nicole, you had 220 students there at one time, you told me, and you have 85 left. That means 135 have returned back home?
Yes.
130?
Yep. So the 220 number was the students who were there over spring break. So we had athletes who were on campus for spring sports, but unfortunately our season was canceled per I think it was the NCAA or SUNYAC. So a lot of those were athletes who were planning to stay to practice, but they ended up going home because they no longer had a season.
Okay. Dana, can you talk to us about your interaction with the colleges, particularly with SUNY Potsdam and what you're doing there, that type of thing?
Yeah, so we had a meeting with all 4 colleges about, well, it's like 2.5 weeks ago now. And we, kind of explained the situation, and they had questions and back and forth. And then we were in contact with them as we knew that some students were just coming back to pick up their items. And all of those buses did not end up coming to campus after our conversations. And we explained how meals and like grab and go style, all of those things would be important. we talked about the importance of the self-isolation. So making sure students coming back from areas with high number of cases could have their own rooms, could have their own bathrooms. They should stay on campus. And when they did have to go out, because at that time, self-isolation does allow you to go pick up your meal, but we wanted to do that on their own and to maintain 6 feet of spacing. I think most of the campuses had some sort of a plan or a contract, and maybe you can speak to that, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the 85 students who remained on, we did an updated housing license. So when the students live on campus, they normally have an agreement that they'll behave and that they'll keep the room in good condition, or if not, they'll be charged. So they had an updated housing agreement that they signed, which outlined that at any point, if we felt they were violating the social distancing guidelines or any of the governor's directives, that they would be removed from campus, that we had the right to remove them at any time, that they understood that this is, a public health emergency. So all of the students did sign that agreement and know what could happen if they're violating that.
I've got a question, Kevin.
Mr. Forsyth.
Yeah, Nicole, you mentioned most of the teachers and staff were off-site right after the school was closed. What sort of supervision was involved with these 85 kids, and who was doing it?
Yeah, great question. So to reiterate, our faculty and staff, we have essential and non-essential, like many other state organizations. So right now, our essential staff are on campus, which includes university police, physical plant, cleaners. So we have residence hall directors, which are professional level staff who are in the buildings. We also have cohorts of residence assistants, or RAs, as you've probably seen in movies and things. So they're being supervised in the residence halls by those people. University police also does rounds quite frequently to ensure that students are not gathering and are staying in their rooms.
And you feel confident? Do you feel confident that worked or is working?
I believe it is for on campus. Now, certainly off-campus students are residents of the towns in which their apartment is.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's we're working with our local law enforcement as well to ensure that if they see a gathering, that they address it. We sent a note out specifically to our off-campus students, letting them know that if they get in trouble off campus, it does come on campus through our judicial process. So certainly I know there's been concerns of students late at night, parties at their houses. We are working with especially Potsdam Village PD to help that because again, they're not on our campus, so we can't, shut off swipe cards for residence halls or do things that we could on campus for off-campus students.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burke has a question. John?
Yeah, Nicole, I guess and maybe Dana too, I'm wondering, why would we test for students that were asymptomatic? And was it because of their proximity with the one that had mild symptoms? I'm just curious. As we know, the people that show no symptoms probably pose the greatest risk for transmission, simply because they don't know they have the symptoms. They don't know they have the virus. So I guess I'm wondering, how did we get to the place where we test it for and only for who were non-symptomatic?
So I can start on this one, Nicole. They didn't just test for, I think initially they tested 18 students, and I believe it was last Monday or last Tuesday. And that was in consultation with the Public Health Department and with Dr. Williams through the Board of Health. And I think his rationale was, if people have just traveled back from an area that had a higher level of cases, and it was going to be more difficult to isolate because you're in a congregate area, that like it would just be just a precautionary test. And so I know St. Lawrence Health Systems did provide the health center with some of the testing, like the materials that they needed. And so it was in consultation with Dr. Williams. And it sounds like maybe two more students were tested since then, but we have used him as a consultation on whether testing should be done or not. And so that is not the normal criteria to test. But I think it's because of coming onto campus and being in an area where you are closer to others. He was thinking that that would be the best practice.
Can I follow up with a question?
Certainly, John.
Kevin?
Certainly.
Do you see any indication for testing maybe the other 60-some students? I guess I'm not trying to second guess Dr. Wams or you, Dana, because I have respect for both of you, but I guess I'm just wondering, since we know 4 had no symptoms, and maybe the rationale was from the areas where they had traveled from, but again, those students, I'm assuming were in contact with a number of other students in residence, but I may be wrong on that.
Right. So I think the rationale for testing those who had traveled was because they'd be at a higher risk. So for those students who stayed on campus, they would not be. Now, could they, mix back and forth? Yes. But now some students who have been back for at least about 7 days. And so when you look at the incubation period, if we don't have any other students with symptoms, the value of the testing becomes less and less. So that's kind of a tricky question. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Thank
you.
Yeah. Anyone else has a question or would like to make? Yes, go ahead.
I do one follow-up.
Certainly.
It cuts in and out, and I miss a lot of the important part, I think, on, this is Lisbon, a little slower here. But, so how many students, at first I thought I heard that 85 didn't leave for spring break and were on site. But now I hear that some left and came. How many left to wherever and then came back and now I've left again? Do we have that number?
Yep. Okay. So 85 students living on campus now through May. Of those 85, let's call it 25 had left at some point over spring break and returned back.
And some of those went to hot zones. And then they came back.
Throughout New York State, yes.
Okay. So 25 of the 85. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you, Nicole, for. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Ms. Curran? Oh, it's Ms. Arquette. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just a follow-up question real quick. The students that did leave for spring break, when they came back, were they, and maybe you said this, did we ask where they had gone on spring break before they came back to campus? I mean, besides just going home, were they in vacation spots that were heavily crowded?
So of the 25, I would say they all were.
Not dealing with this. Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't think we heard the response.
Okay. So the question, I believe, was, did any of the students indicate that they were coming back from vacation from another area? And no, of those students, they all returned from an area in New York State.
But did we ask the students, or when you said you can come back and get anything that you need from your dorms, or they're returning for spring break, was there a method used to reach out to the students to ask them where they had come from, knowing that COVID was higher in many areas?
Absolutely, yes. We did ask where they were coming back from.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
If I could just share about the hardship process. So the students had to complete an application identifying what their hardship was and why they should return to campus. A small team did review all of those hardship applications. We had well over 200. to see, are they telling the truth? Is it really a hardship, or do they want to come hang out with a boyfriend or girlfriend on campus? So we went through those. We looked at when they last swiped on campus. So what was the last day that they were here, and other factors. So we did go through those very thoroughly to make sure that the students who remain here absolutely need to be here, and it was the right thing to do for those 85 students.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, Nicole, for coming and speaking your piece. This is your first pandemic and it's ours. It's no doubt that the public is alarmed that students who were vacant from campus have returned, and now we have some cases. And I think fortunately for the colleges and SUNY Potsdam in particular, we're glad that it's not, for your sake and a public relations sake, it's not the first case, that there are cases in other areas of St. Lawrence County from actual, long-term St. Lawrence County residents. I thought, and as we look back and let's look forward, better communication between the colleges and particularly our Department of Public Health would be necessitated. Obviously, we didn't know until the 17th that students had actually returned. So now we're kind of scrambling. I think we're off to a better foot. We have better communications coming between you and Dana with Public Health and with our county administrator. So let's hope that we get through this. And I wish the colleges are very important to this community. The students are important. We're glad to have them. And hopefully we can continue this process and mitigate some of the health issues that may come. So thank you very much. I think Ruth Doyle, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nicole, if you'd like.
I was going to say, for anybody, if any questions come up, please don't hesitate to reach out. My office line always rolls to my cell phone, so I'm literally always available. And I think that, you're absolutely right. We want to get through this. We want to keep our community safe. But SUNY Potsdam definitely wants to be there after this is over, because we know that it's going to have a long-lasting impact on our economy and on our county, serving on the Potsdam and the county chambers. I know that they're doing a great job right now to help people through this. I stand ready in my role when this finishes to help our businesses, and we're committed beyond this to make sure that we can survive and our county can continue to survive.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Conant. So I think Ruth has a couple other things that she'd like to talk that concerns the COVID-19. So you're welcome to stay on. Maybe there's some questions for you, Nicole. Okay.
As we wrap this up, I just wanted to mention and echo exactly that. We have, I would say, what started as a conversation about transportation gave us an opportunity to talk with all 4 colleges and establish an open line, a better open line than we've had probably on many other fronts. So I'm grateful for that. I think they have availed themselves to us. And as we continue to both express and understand the importance of each other, that helps us make sure that, in those communications, we're a part of that dialogue. Secondly, I just wanted to mention that we also are working with our neighboring counties. So because of the size of our county, we've had the opportunity through some of our confirmed cases to work with our neighboring counties to share information in a way that makes sense to minimize the work on the public health department when they're doing their contact tracing. So specifically in Jefferson and then in Franklin, we've been able to talk with those folks. We've been able to talk about processes and departments. We all have, not as much horsepower as we'd like to get after the contact tracing that needs to occur. And as you know, Lewis County also reported their first 2 cases over the weekend as well. I did want to mention, as part of the executive orders that I had forgotten to mention, that also the primary date, many of you have seen, has been moved. And I'm working to schedule a time tomorrow, middle of the day, to meet with Tom and Jenny over Zoom to have a discussion about their expected impacts. I did see that the ballots that are marked for April could still be used in the June date, but also I'm certain there's other impacts that we need to bring to your attention. So we'll be having that dialogue. I just had a couple of other items under County Administrator's report, if there's no questions. And then at the end, I just want to make sure there's nothing else that you'd like us to know or work on for this. I did want to mention that last Friday, we reviewed the RFP results for pharmacy. And I have placed the slideshow that was provided to us by Burnham on Google Drive under 2020 information. So if you want to go out and take a look at that, legislators participated in that discussion. And I think there's some interesting information out there if you want to take a look at that. And then also, I just wanted to mention that tonight, effective today, I've received a letter from Legislator Haggard from District 10 submitting his resignation to the Board of Legislators, effective today. So I would request that the search committee be appointed by Chair Lightfoot at our board meeting next week, and that they could begin their work to seek a replacement. Are there any questions? Are there any areas, or do any board members, are you satisfied with the information you're getting on COVID? Are there areas where we can improve? I want to make sure we leave this meeting with you understanding, what we're providing to you.
We have a question from Ms. Terminelli. Nicole?
I want to thank everybody, Dana and Ruth, everybody, for making sure that we are in the loop about everything. And the press releases that are going out on a daily basis are very informative. And they keep reminding people about the precautions to take as far as social distancing goes. I was wondering, NISAC just released this week the Take 5 for New York campaign. Remembering right now that people's social, emotional well-being is super important, especially to our elderly or senior population. Those people that live alone, people that suffer from anxiety, depression, those that suffer addiction. And now as we start to quarantine and isolate people, there could be some mental health considerations. And the Take 5 for New York, I'm wondering if that's something we can put in our press releases on a daily basis that would just remind everybody to take 5 minutes out of their day to make as many phone calls or connections, FaceTime, anything with people that they know, neighbors, relatives, family members, just to check on the mental health and well-being of our residents.
Thank you, Nicole. It's a good idea. Dana, did you have some comments? I think you're on mute again. Okay.
Sorry, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I just have one more thing. So I've been doing those weekly calls. We've done the Facebook Live. I'm doing a lot of things out of my comfort zone, but I'm doing all of those things so that, we can get the information out. So if you do have feedback, I'm on radio stations constantly. So I think through this experience, if I'm not an expert by then, I don't know what will happen. But if you have feedback on some of the other ways that we can get information out, because that's really what my goal is, please let me know.
Okay. Thank you, Dana. So we do have committee reports. We can go through them really quickly. If you have not met, just say pass or whatever. First up is Cornell Cooperative Extension. Mr. Denisha.
I have nothing to report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Denisha. Ms. Curran for Fish and Wildlife Management Board. Rita, we can see you now for now.
So they changed our meeting and pushed it back to June because of the COVID.
Okay, thank you very much. Fish Advisories Board, Ms. Terminelli.
We have not had a meeting since the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Leader with the Governor Fair Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During both the February and March meetings, the primary topic of business, as everyone probably knows, is they're planning a rodeo. I believe the date is June 13th and 14th. It's something relatively new they haven't had in many, many years, and they hope it will be a good fundraiser, and they're pretty excited about it. I don't know if they'll be meeting in April, and if they do, I may or may not attend.
Well, we'll probably have to vote on a legislator to volunteer to ride. I'm thinking Nancy. Right now.
Very good.
So the IDA, Mr. Reagan. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The IDA has created a website which they're updating on a daily basis with information for businesses affected by the state of emergency and the COVID. In addition, the IDA's owed about $5 million by about 50 companies. They've offered all those companies a 3-month no payment, no interest break. They've also coordinated with the North Country Alliance, the North Country Economic Development Fund, the Greater Messina Economic Development Fund, and the Augsburg Growth Fund to offer similar assistance as well. With the North Country Alliance, they've created a new regional loan fund of $10,000 for small businesses of less than 20 full-time employees and $25,000 for companies with more than 20 full-time employees. And they've been reaching out to various companies and alerting the county chamber, the Small Business Development Center, banks, and local developers and others to make them aware that this assistance is available. They've worked with quite a few of the larger employers that have been asking the state to be exempted from the New York on pause, pointing out that many of them are essential businesses, that their products are very important down the line on the supply chain. And they've also been working with some local companies to help them offer their services to both equipment and services to assist with the epidemic. Some companies are producing gloves and other products, and the IDA is helping them get them for sale in the supply chain. So the IDA's been working remotely, and but has been working very hard to reach out to the business community and provide them with some concrete assistance. And since the new federal legislation has been passed, they've been working with the state and federal agencies to interpret the new rules and see what programs are being made available, and helping local companies understand what assistance is available. And as the state advances with what they may be offering, they'll be working with them as well.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. My apologies, Mr. Denisha, I skipped over highway. Could you comment, please?
That hurt me, when you missed me. I have nothing to report.
Will never happen again. Thank you. All right, Recreational and Trails Advisory, Mr. Arquette is not here. The RVRDA, Mr. Forsyth.
Well, it hurts me too, Larry, because he always goes with Jim first and he answers everything. But yeah, you took most of the wind out of my sail, I think, Jim. Yeah, nothing to report. We haven't met. I have been in on a lot of the emails from Patrick. I see the attempts they're making. A lot of the small businesses I know don't want to take out loans, but I kudos to them for stepping up and doing what they can. And a lot of the companies don't want to take the extension of the 3 months for payments. They say basically thanks, but no thanks. We'll try to weather the storm, but it's nice to know that it's there, it's available, and that they're working for them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Arquette.
We have not had a meeting, but I would like to commend the Chamber of Commerce on how well they've kept the local businesses up to par on all of the executive orders, and also how well they've kept the community involved, letting them know which businesses are still open, which restaurants are open, and offering takeout so that we can continue to support our small business community.
Thank you very much, Ms. Arquette. Soil and Water, Mr. Berg.
We had a telephone meeting last Thursday night. It was fairly quick, mostly to take care of paying the bills and just an update on how they're managing the office they're all working primarily from home. The Soil and Water did approve the sale of their no-till machine, and in conjunction with that, they also approved a 2-year plan because there will no longer be the no-till machine to rent out. They approved a 2-year plan to help subsidize farmers who would rent a no-till machine, and that subsidy would be up to 30 acres at, I believe it was $19 an acre. So it was a quick meeting, but I think from what I could gather, everything that's been in the works, there's been a few postponements, deadline postponements, but for the most part, they're doing the business from home, so that was good. I don't know, Kevin, did you have anything else?
No, John, you covered it very well. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is old and new business. Does anyone have any old business? Mr. Fay.
It's really not old. It's an addition. I think you may answer to some of the questions, but basically, when our president signed the $2.3 trillion act on Friday, included in that, I'll add it to what we've already heard a little bit. It was the federal guarantee of $350 billion for loans to small businesses. So if you're talking to people or small businesses, some information I've got, if you're thinking about, basically under the guidance and requirements for payroll protection loans, I think the person has to start thinking if he's going to apply for it, he's going to have to start calculating what his monthly payroll are, what his mortgage payments are, and what his utilities, and get this information all available to support his request for a loan. And at this point in time, I believe, as has been mentioned just earlier, that I don't think at the present time the regulatory agencies even know how to administer these loans and which banks are going to be able to give the loans out. But it's something I think that the county should try to keep conscious of and what's taking place in this area, because and it certainly wouldn't, if you know a businessman, to basically try to make contact with the bank he's already been dealing with. I think this information that I've got is important to any small businessman who's looking for it, especially if you can get a guaranteed loan that's guaranteed by the federal government. And I think anybody that's been a student had a guaranteed federal loan, they knew how easy they were to get compared to another loan, unless you're getting your mother, your father to co-sign for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. I think one of the provisions of that bill, these loan bills, is if you employ the same number of people that you had before for a certain period of time, that loan becomes a grant. So it's probably all the details are coming out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's based on 12/31/19 date, so.
Okay, thank you. Any old or new business? Pardon me?
I would want to mention one thing.
Okay, so Ruth would like to mention one thing.
I forgot to make mention of the New York State budget that is still, for all intents purposes, scheduled to come in on time. I believe the Assembly worked out how they're going to vote electronically in the last few hours. And as you know, over the weekend, I believe the Senate sorted out how they will be voting. So there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversation. Steve stepped out of the meeting tonight because NISAC has been hosting calls every night at 7 o'clock until about between 8 and 8:30. So he and I have been taking turns listening into that call. They're doing their best to monitor the conversation as far as budget items go and COVID response at the state level. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and we'll send you any information that we see in the next day or two as these things come up for discussion and vote.
Okay, so if there's no more old or new business, we'd like to move into an executive session. We have to talk about negotiations, personnel, and appointments. Is there anyone that would move for executive session?
Make a motion.
Second.
Forsythe, seconded by Mr. Perkins and Ms. Terminelli and Ms. Curran. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're in executive